Hey, hi, hello, welcome to episode 57, even though I didn't change that note in our things. This is episode 57 of Trail Society, brought to you by our friends over at Free Trail. I'm Corrine Malcolm.
One day we'll get it right. I'm Keely Henninger.
And I'm Hillary Allen.
At least we keep remembering to hit record at the beginning of each of these. We have not yet forgotten that. So I feel like we're on a positive roll.
That's kind of a win. Yeah.
Yeah. Keely, you're out east right now, right?
Yeah. I had one of my best friends from home get married on Saturday. So we made the trip out east, got to see some family. And then as of now, I'm hanging out for another week or so to get another interview done too, because I have one interview in person out here, which is rare. Not many med school interviews are in person anymore, but I have one. And so as of now, I'm going to take it unless I get a couple more in the meantime that are at schools I'd rather, I prefer.
Well, that's exciting. Welcome from the East Coast, Pennsylvania girl in the house. And then Hilly, I know that you're back running some. Are you still going over to Scotland? I know that had originally been the plan pre toe break.
Yeah. Ireland, they're pretty much similar. They're very rainy, lots of midges, kind of an island. But yeah, actually I am, I'm still going to go there. So, I had some meetings with my doctor and it's healing. I can't do anything too crazy techy, but good thing this eco trail isn't technical. So I'm going to try a cool training run as I kind of get back into running and racing, later in the year. Didn't expect it, but yeah, hopefully I'm going to do a race in December of this year. So
nice. Well. Very, very exciting. I think that, yeah, I mean, originally, I think when you're dealing with like your kind of surgical injury stuff earlier this season, you were like, if I don't race at all this year, that's the way the cookie crumbles. And so we're excited to see you back pinning a bib on independent of any of it. So very, very cool.
Me too.
Heck yeah. Well, one of the next times we chat, hopefully we'll get to be talking about Ireland and running on hopefully nice loamy dirt surfaces.
Yeah,
how's
maybe a little
going
bit
for you, Corrine?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Oh no, you're good.
How's everything going for me? Well, we can talk more about this in a little bit too, but the UTMB right now is stating that for elites to qualify for UTMB for 2024, we have to have a qualifier in by the end of the year. So most people who ran 2023 UTMB have a qualifier that's good still. Like most people are in the clear. If you qualified at all this spring, summer, etc., you're golden already.
Not me.
But those of us who either didn't have a qualifier, had a really old qualifier, had been grandfathered in via an injury, pregnancy, etc., or had been top 3 last year and then only needed to collect a stone this year and did not repeat as top 3, we are all scrambling just a little bit. And we're trying to get them to extend it to like March, April timeframe. But we won't know if they're going to extend it or not for a couple more weeks. And so I am currently planning to go to Kodiak in
fun,
a couple weeks to run 100K. So that's
cool
news from Lake Wobegon is that I'm going to go run 100K in Big Bear, California, which was not on my 2023 bingo card. So yeah,
because you're still planning to do UTCT 100 miler, right?
I'm going to race at UTCT. I don't know if I'll do the 100K or the 100 miler, but I'll be there and I'll be racing. So either way, I'm
toying with Thailand.
Yeah, that's the race I'm looking at, Keely.
Oh, fun. Cool. Yeah. I mean, it's like toying a good 1-2 punch. You get a little bit of Western States action and a little bit of UTMB action.
Yeah. Well, is the 100 mile the qualifier at Thailand?
Yeah.
That's a gnarly 100 mile too.
That's what I've heard.
Talking to, I'm sure you both have been talking to Hannah Allgood. It's not a very straightforward race course, I think, in the sense that it is a lot of kind of on trail running.
Yeah, this is exactly what I heard.
I don't have stoke for repeating my 2023 right now. So I'm trying to be what makes me excited. And bushwhacking kind of sounds more fun right now. So I don't know. We'll see.
Nice. Epic Thailand adventures for many people, hopefully, coming down the pipeline. A bunch of people went over there to do the 100K and the 100 mile last year, including podcast favorite, Jenny Quilty. That was how she got into Western States last year. So we've got some people that we can ping about Thailand for you all. I am taking the much tamer route to the only race that fits in my calendar with UTCT as a must right now. So, it's neither here nor there. gonna run 100K, gonna run 100K because there's only 10,000 feet of climbing in the whole darn thing. So if you see me doing a lot of flat running, that is why.
So wait, that 100K at UTCC only has 10,000?
No, at Kodiak.
At Kodiak. Okay, I was going to say UTCC has more than that.
Yeah, but it's still a lot of running. Like I'm not really worried about vert for UTCT either.
Yeah, just get in your mind that you're going to have to do a rock wall scramble at one point.
Oh, I've already done that. Yep,
Isn't it so hard?
Yeah. Oh, it's insane.
It's okay.
I remember that was the one section I was like really bonking at, and Ryan Sands comes down the rock face because he's dropping out, and he's like, "Don't worry, Keely, this is the only technical spot." I'm like, "I'm climbing on a rock wall. Like, of course this is technical."
Yeah, I watched Drew Holman do an interval session on that section of the trail last year when Sasha and Marzelle and I were just out for an easy run. So yeah, I know what lies ahead. I'm very familiar with the UTCT course. So
I just remember doing that stuff at night. I was like, oh boy, like this is insane.
Yeah, it's gnarly.
Yeah. Well, neither here nor there. We've got some adventuring to come, be it in Big Bear, California, Ireland, Cape Town, or Thailand. You'll see us somewhere again this fall, apparently, because the race season is not done yet. We do have some news to cover and some results to cover. Some kind of cool stuff went down this weekend. But yeah, you're going to see a lot of pros, I think, throwing down in a late season race if they don't yet have a qualifier. So don't be surprised if you see some random people show up at some kind of seemingly weird races in the next couple of months. But before we jump into the news, we have to give a shout out to the folks over at AG1. Again, they have been with us since the beginning of this whole thing, keeping us hydrated, green juiced up, minerals, vitamins, prebiotics, probiotics, which in this case is a symbiotic, helping me absorb iron every single day, which I am enjoying immensely because it makes me feel a whole lot better. If you also would like to try some AG1, you're going to go over to www.athleticgreens.com/Trail Society. And there, with your first order, you can get a free 1-year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs, which is a steal of a deal for any of you that are on the road in the near term. Mm-hmm. And I guess from there, we got to slide into some news. Keely, this feels kind of similar to the news we shared last time, where it's just like, read your receipts, people. Women's sports are on fire, and it's made me really, really excited. Starting with Hillary, our tennis buff. Coco Gauff's U.S. Open victory was so good.
Good.
Oh my God.
I mean, I was there at the U.S. Open for a little bit, and I got to.
You got to go to the U.S. Open?
Yeah, I went there.
I'm so jealous.
I know.
Been on such a tennis kick. We watched the whole thing.
It's my favorite. Oh my gosh. So
fun.
I got to, it was insane. I wasn't in Arthur Ashe Stadium. So actually Coco Gauff was playing the night I was there, but I was in the Louis Armstrong Stadium. And I watched, like, it was insane to watch this match that it was a men's match that went until 11:30, and then the women had to play after that. It was insane. Mm-hmm. But like Coco had some really big upsets, and like she was playing super well.
19 years old, right?
Yeah,
like super young.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then, I mean, one of my favorite matches where she played Caroline Wozniacki, who's ranked number 1 in the world. Yep. She took a 4-year break to have 2 kids, get married, and then is back and was like killing it. And so I was actually excited to see her lose to the tournament winner, because I think she's like on a tear. So that was amazing to see. But yeah, like this 19-year-old with like insane poise, and she played this other woman who, what was her name? Sabalenka. And I watched Sabalenka play like one of her breakout matches like years ago at the US Open. So it was really cool to see her come full circle. I think she won, Australian Open.
She's had a good year.
Yeah. So she's like a force.
She's so strong. Like some of her hits are just so fast.
She's so tall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was really fun.
It was so cool.
So the big news coming out of it, though, is that match drew a record 3.4 million viewers, which is 1.1 million more than Novak Djokovic's win as well. And it's a 22%. It's a 92%. Sorry, 22% was the men also had an increase in viewership, but the women had a 92% increase over the 2022 final, which is just like, it's the most viewed women's singles final ESPN has ever aired.
Mm-hmm. It's so cool. Yeah. And I wonder if it's like part of it has to do with golf being from the US, but also like, holy cow, really, really cool. Yeah. And it was really good tennis too.
Well, so this is like, yeah, maybe I was going to say through that she was from the US, like the viewership, right? But I mean, a lot of people, you have to purchase the tickets, the finals before you know who's even playing it. So, obviously,
but we're talking ESPN viewership. We're talking viewership
of course.
On TV. So
yeah, so of course that is, because like, yeah, seen the
right. And she
locals.
She's very well spoken for being so young. And I feel like she really kind of like liked to speak out about her haters. And I think that's very rare for female athletes to defend themselves. And I was very impressed by her ability to not only stand up for herself, but articulate it in a way that made her sound like very smart and not like easily agitated, but just willing to stand up for herself. And it was really cool.
Yeah. I think the quote towards the end of one of her post finals interviews said, people have been thinking that they're pouring water on my flame, and it turns out they've just been pouring oil on it. And I was just like, dang, okay, this gal is going to be a force to reckon with. So that was very, very cool to see. So Coco is the future. That was a good marketing bump for I think New Balance had some timing on some Coco shirts that went really, really well. What was
also really cool too is that the semifinals had a also very young US guy make it, which was sweet. Who didn't make it to the finals. No, he didn't make the semifinals. He got beat by a I think also 19-year-old dark-skinned American who like did his breakout race or breakout match. He basically made like more money by making the semifinals in the US Open than he's made in his entire career so far. And it was like super cool to see him get to the semis, but then he had to play Novak, and Novak beat him in the semis, but it was still really cool.
Yeah, I think I'm forgetting Shelton, of course. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. He was amazing. Yeah.
People are like, wow, these two are really into tennis.
Dude, I love watching tennis.
Yeah, this is like
favorite sport.
If you haven't watched tennis, this is our pitch for you to get really, really into it. But I think we have got to move on to another really cool bit of news coming out of women's sports as well, and that has to go over to the WNBA. This is reported via The Gist that the WNBA has its most watched regular season in 21 years. Viewership across its national TV partners, ABC, CBS, EPN, and ESPN2, was up 21% over the 2022 season. Attendance has been up 16% this year, averaging almost 7,000 fans per game, the most since 2018. In total, they've had over 1.5 million fans in attendance. The highest total attendance in 13 years. Just talking about how it's a record-setting year for the WNBA across all national networks. The regular season reached over 36 million total unique viewers, the highest since 2008, and a 27% jump from last year. The All-Star Game was the most watched in 16 years, while the draft was the most watched since 2004. So just talking about this like reemergence, reinvestment of the public in women's athletics. And I think we're starting to see that across sports when we're looking at kind of our women's professional leagues. And so those were some really cool numbers coming out of the WNBA that I saw just this past week.
Yeah. And it's right after the big investment into the WNBA. So, money helps.
Yeah. Turns out, right? That's always the argument. Like, well, if women's sports were going to make money, then they'd get more viewership, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, no, you have to invest in the sport to like increase viewership, to increase TV time, to increase coverage, et cetera. So it's this cyclical investment that's really important. So that was really good to see.
Yeah.
And I think the final note we had was some more UTMB stuff. I don't want to call it nonsense because it's not complete nonsense, but essentially She Races, Sophie Powers, the women's working group via the PTRA has had many meetings with UTMB to better support not just women, but kind of people from different backgrounds, adaptive athletes, et cetera. There's kind of a wide working group that all gets hubbed under like UTMB's people initiatives. But most recently on the women's side of things, they've announced that they're updating the UTMB index score in which women then aren't compared to men, i.e., it's kind of not fair where like Courtney Dauwalter's UTMB index is 850. because it's time back from the leading male in many races, et cetera. So it puts women at a disadvantage when it comes to getting things like car passes for your crew at races, when 30 passes are given out to men and 9 are given out to women, et cetera. It's all based on UTMB index. So they're reworking the UTMB index score to create kind of a more level index, in which, Courtney will then be recognized with the super high index score as well. And all women's index scores will be elevated because of that, because they won't be based on like time back from Keely and Journée. Like, great, cool. You might be the second female in the race, but when your time back from Killian is what matters, or Jim, et cetera, it's not quite a fair ranking system. So they're changing policies there as well. And it hasn't actually come out on the website yet, but I've seen kind of the initial reveal of it. And, you got to place bets that Courtney Dauwalter might have the highest ever UTMB index score ahead of the likes of Jim Walmsley and Killian Jornet. So we'll be keeping our eyes for kind of more official announcements coming out on that. And then they also recently announced, being more thoughtful with women's like products on the course, period products, more female-only toilets on course, changing rooms at aid stations where drop bags and crews are allowed, et cetera. Nothing like getting naked in the Courmayeur gymnasium with cameras and there's nowhere for you to go type of thing. So there's some kind of thoughtful changes that are getting put in place for future UTMB finals, but also other UTMB World Series races that just kind of better takes care and shows support for the women who are getting to that start line, which will hopefully encourage more women to get to those start lines as well. But yeah, big kudos to the women's working group at the PTRA and She Races and Sophie Powers, because none of that would be happening without those women putting in countless hours, including like Esther Chillog and Katie Asmith are two really vocal members of that group that I work with on other things. And so it's been really very cool to watch some of those updates come to fruition.
Yeah.
I think that's it from the news front. Before we get nearer to our meat and potatoes, we have to talk about race results from this past week. Last time we spoke with you all, we're like, nothing else happened besides UTMB. But personally, a very, very short race that happened this past weekend was my most anticipated race of the season, I think, like from a fan perspective. And that was the Pikes Peak Ascent as part of the US tour for the Golden Trail Series, World Series. Just because the field lining up there was really, really, really good, including some like newer names, particularly on the women's side with like Allie Ostrander taking the start line for her first Golden Trail World Series event. Cool. Sophia Lockley going up against Judith, Anna Gibson being part of this field, et cetera. Like there's like this really exciting future wave of trail crushers. And then obviously Remy trying to go back after Matt Carpenter's ascent record that he missed the year before. And the race is delivered in like a very, very huge way.
Yeah, that was so cool. I actually went on my long run on the weekend on Sunday, and it was like a super clear day and you could see all the way over to Pikes Peak. I love it when that happens. And you could it's funny. It's like the south part of the big mountains have a dusting of snow and all the Satwatch are totally dry.
Yeah, there was snow up at the top of Pikes Peak.
Yeah.
In the post-race coverage, because there's not enough cell coverage on the mountain itself to provide live coverage of the event. But yeah, there's definitely snow up top. And Remy Bonnet did break Matt Carpenter's 30-year-old ascent record.
By like 2 minutes.
Yeah, I think it was like 60 seconds ish. I think Matt's was like 2:02 and Remy's was 2 hours. 2 hours and 20 seconds.
Yeah.
So I think it was just over 60 seconds was kind of the difference there. But remember, Matt Carpenter set that record during the marathon, not during a pure ascent of the hill either. And then Matt was at the award ceremony as well to give Remy his award, which was, I think, very cool.
That's cool. It wasn't it kind of projected that he was going to run that because he ran like a super fast Manitou incline.
He set
he broke his own
Yeah.
record on the Manitou
Yeah.
incline. Remy broke it last year as well, and then didn't put
Broke his
together
own,
kind of the
though. Yeah.
perfect day. Yeah, he took another like 17 seconds off of it or something. And then behind Remy though was Patrick Kipenego, who was kind of thought to be like the next kind of the other guy who could make a dig at this. He finished about 4 minutes back behind Remy, and then Eli Hemming, who's putting together just an absolutely stellar season with great results at Mont Blanc Marathon as well, finished in third place. So as top American male. Joe Gray, I think, managed to pull off a 5th place performance there, and just is like such a consistent beast as he's
with a broken hand.
Can't stop that man. Can't stop that man at all. On the women's side, Sophia Lockley and Judith Wider were neck and neck until like the final 2-ish miles. They were going back and forth quite a bit. And Sophia said that she waited for the 2-mile mark to go and then just like dug as hard as she could, kind of launched a late attack. Ended up winning by, I think, about 4-ish minutes as well on the women's side. But really broke broke apart. And then in third was Anna Gibson, the young recent UW graduate from the Teton Valley, Jackson Hole area, signed with Brooks this spring, running both on the track and on the trail. So third place finish for her there after we saw her break out on the trail scene back at Broken Arrow earlier this year. And then my favorite surprise of the women's race was actually Alicia Vargo.
Yeah, I forgot. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
They called her
World Beware. Holy cow.
Yeah, Mama is back. Mama 3, I think now. Just an absolute crusher. She'll be a name that many people who are newer to the sport can't place, don't recognize, etc. But she is fierce. And it was so good to see her throw down a 7th in what is a very, very good field. So, and then
so cool.
And then what I'm waiting to see is Allie Ostrander is, prolific on YouTube, etc. I just kind of want to see, like her take on it. This was the most competitive trail field she's lined up against ever. And I'm just really curious. I think she's supposed to go to Mammoth as well. This will come out.
How did she do?
She finished 20th, like 30 minutes behind Sophia. So something didn't go to plan there. I don't know if it was the altitude. It was not just not her day, etc. I would have expected her maybe to be in the top.
Was at fitness wise.
Yeah. I'd expect her to be more in like a top 10 group. I know she's been training super hard. But yeah, to finish 20th, I think was probably not the day that she was hoping for. So curious to see if she goes to Mammoth, like if she's healthy, etc. But I think that she's a very anticipated person on the trail scene. We've seen her run Mount Marathon. We've seen her run like on the junior team for World Mountain Running Champs, etc. Kind of come out of her track, her more full-time track career into trail in the past year. Just I think a lot of us want to see her perform super well, and just kind of like it did not go to plan with the ascent on for whatever reason on Saturday. Yeah. So we'll see how Mammoth goes. This will come out after Mammoth, but she's supposed to race the 26K there as well. So we shall see.
Mammoth is going to have a pretty good start line too.
Mammoth will have an insanely good start line because all the Golden Trail international athletes are staying over for it.
Cool.
And then some other U.S. athletes will be jumping in, I am sure.
Cool. Yeah.
On the longer distance side of things, Run Rabbit was this weekend.
Yeah.
Lots of money to be thrown around at that race. Despite that, it doesn't get the fields I think it deserves. Unfortunately, its proximity to UTMB draws a lot of folks that way for sure. But hot off of her Colorado Trail FKT, Tara Dower, East Coast gal,
crazy.
She ran like the second or third fastest time ever on the Run Rabbit
Courtney, basically.
Course. Yeah. And the course has been modified a little bit over the years. And so I don't know if that's based on the old course or if that's on the newer course that's been in effect for like the last like 2 or 3 years. So, but she ran a really, really great time. She ran a really smart race. She moved up all day, did not go out super, super hot. And then it wasn't like, it was actually kind of close between her and Christy, who's a Mammoth area runner. I know Katie Asmuth and Danny Moreno are friends of hers. She's a mom. She's a nurse.
Cool.
For debut 100 mile, finished second there to a pretty nice payday. And then Karen Holland finished third in that race. But yeah, good.
They pay out the top 5, right?
Pay out the top 7 as long as there are 30 starters in that gender field.
Holy cow.
So I think they pay out the
wild.
top 3 to 5 independent of that, and they'll pay out as much as 7 if there are 30 starters. So, and then there's also a team competition as well.
Right. I know. You can walk away with a good amount of money.
With a good chunk of change. Yeah. And on the men's side, Dave Stevens, who is Canadian and won this race back in 2021, took the men's win. Fan favorite Jimmy Elam did not let Dave run away with it super easily. I think that race between 1 and 2 was also very close. Jimmy's a Salt Lake City, I think, area guy. Good friends with like Mike and Leah and that whole crew. Ultra athlete. But yeah, close battle there. And then Arlen Glick was well back in the early stages of the race and ran his way to a third despite taking what sounded like kind of a big fall and seemingly temporarily losing eyesight.
What is this race and eyesight? Courtney had no eyesight towards the end of this race like 4 years ago,
which is why you see her put eye drops in her eyes constantly at a race like UTMB. So you build up cornea pressure, essentially. It's more pronounced at high altitude races where the air is drier and then overnight running. Yeah.
You're cold
too. Yeah.
So it happens at UTMB. Well, cold affects the dryness. So
it happened to me at Lavaredo for like 40 miles and I was so confused.
But, it happens to people at UTMB every year. They come into Courmayeur and they cannot see. So it's basically a temporary like cornea inflammation essentially.
And it
helps so you see people wear clear
glasses.
Clear glasses and eye drops to keep your eyes hydrated. But yeah, overnight races. So Run Rabbit starts at noon. You're going to see it more in races like that, in those noontime or nighttime starts versus like
it was Lavaredo.
Yeah, exactly. Those nighttime starts are hard. Just quick shout outs from the rut. I mostly just want to give Bailey Kowalczyk a shout out for returning to the rut and taking the win there. Really good to see Bailey running smart, running healthy. We're going to just kind of jump
field too.
Yeah, and like a nice little field. We're going to kind of skip around a little bit. Jennifer Lichter won the 50K for the third time ever after getting what was a GI bug at OCC and having to drop out there. So good to see her back there. It's a big North Face party, essentially. So I think most of the podium on both sides is North Face athletes. But yeah, those are the 2 really big shout outs I wanted to give out there. Also, Kelly Wolfer in the 26K finishing second behind Bailey, and then Brittany Charbonneau was in third. So good to see Kelly back on a start line after I think needing a lot of time to recover after Lavaredo earlier this summer. So good to see her. I bet that we see her at another race this fall. Just given probably wanting to qualify. Quick ladies shout outs because that's our theme. Casey Lichtag won I Am Tough over the weekend. And
can I do another I Am Tough shout out quick?
Yeah. What's your other I Am
My
Tough
athlete Carly got 5th at I Am Tough as her first 100 mile.
She was crewed with Katrina.
Awesome.
With Katrina.
I love Carly. Yeah. Awesome. It's a super, super cool race. I saw that Emily Hoggood was out there pacing Hillary Matheson Yang around the course as well, which was pretty cool to see. And then Tiana Way County 100, which is like probably the hardest, besides Uray, probably the hardest non-UTM or not UTB, probably the hardest non-hard rock qualifying 100 mile on the West Coast anyway. They have issues with getting people to sign up for it every year because it's a hard mountain 100 in September when there are 7 other hard rock qualifiers going on, including I Am Tough, Run Rabbit, etc. So unfortunately, the race does not get the shine I think it deserves because it is a burly event. But Jenny Abeg, who did that really cool high route in the North Cascades last summer with Caitlin Gerbin. If you have not watched the video called The High Route, you can find it over on YouTube. It's so cool. And Jenny Abeg did her first 100 mile, winning the Tiana Way County 100 over the weekend as well. Oh, and then actually former podcast guest Caitlin Jacobson ran Tiana Way as well, I think finishing 3rd female. So got to give a shout out to Caitlin as she's been one of our guests in the past. Last but not least, we have to give a quick shout out to the folks that raced Tour, the Tour de Gents over in and Tour de Glacier over in Italy. What a stupid, crazy hard race.
I was going to ask Corrine, I know we've talked about this before. Is this our retirement plan? Are we going to do this? I'm
going to do Tour in like the next 3 years for sure.
Okay, never mind. Then
there'll be like an infant. There'll be like an infant involved. It'll be a whole thing. No, this is definitely happening in the near term for me. Franco Colli of Italy won his 4th TDG, breaking his own course record in a time of 66 hours and 39 minutes. Again, that's a 330 kilometer route with like 25,000 meters of climbing. So it's a burly time out there. And then the UK's Emma Stewart won the women's race in 82 hours and 21 minutes. It's insanity. Go over to the Tour Instagram page and look at some videos. It's wild. It's really, really cool. So I've got a soft spot in my heart for Tour. Moving right along, we have to give one more ad shout out before we get into the meat and potatoes today, which is brought to us by inspiration from you all. And that is we have to give a shout out to the folks over at The Feed. Since we're all racing again this year, you know that we are stocking up with snacks for training and sports nutrition that we're going to be taking on our runs and races with us. We do that by going over to The Feed at www.thefeed.com/Trail Society, your literal one-stop shop for any nutrition product I think that is currently available on the market. If you go over to that link, the www.thefeed.com/Trail Society, you can get a $15 feed credit to use quarterly. So $60 over the course of the year. Hilly, you have an important announcement to make about a cool new feed product. Can you tell us what that is? It looks like cookies to me.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. This is like the best thing. Cause like, obviously we like the real food. And like the last time that I know I was a little bit late in the last episode joining. So I joined for the feed part and I was telling you about my waffle sandwiches that I was bringing on my bike rides up a 14er. But I've been trying out this new stuff. It's called Fresh. They're basically just performance cookies. They're basically just cookies. So I can eat them. Like it's a really nice treat, like during a run, or a ride. But actually, like my favorite thing is kind of like as I'm drinking my recovery shake, like just having either like half of a cookie then, or like even like part of a cookie before I run. It's so good.
Whole cookies all the time, folks. None of this half cookie nonsense. But yeah, kind of a new product launch for them recently, which is kind of like it's a limited run of things, i.e. they sell out pretty quickly, but you can go see it over on the homepage there, and you can have a half cookie, but I'd recommend
the whole thing. Just eat the whole thing.
Just do it. Okay, so meat and potatoes. I'm calling this Trail 101, and I think this is going to be a recurring topic for us because while we've been around the trail running world and industry for a while now, and can get into this old habit of like, we love acronyms. We think everyone is on the same page as us at all times. We know that is not the case. And one of you actually reached out to us and said, hey, like, I've got some like kind of newbie questions and I'd love to have you guys answer them. And so we'd love to kind of have you guys send us some more Ask Us Anything style questions as well. And in the coming weeks, we can start answering them maybe in a new segment, maybe in whole episode topics, but kind of themed around that Trail 101 idea of like, just like getting down to basics and making sure that we can help fill in whatever's missing in your own trail running encyclopedia. So to start, we're going to talk about choosing and finding trail routes for day-to-day runs and long runs. And I wanted to start with some trail vocabulary because that was part of that question. And I just chose some random words that are trail themed for us to go over. And maybe you have your own definitions for these at home. So slide into our DMs and let us know if there's any other trail vocabulary specific to talking about the thing that we're running on. Slide into our DMs with some fun new vocab for everyone. But the first one in my mind was single track versus double track. Who's got a quick definition of single track versus double track?
Yeah, I guess I'll take it. Like I think about single track is just single file, like you have to go like one behind each other. Double track would be, it's almost like take a single track and another single track and put it like next to each other. So two people can run side by side, go in the same direction. But I like to think that as like a car could go through it. There's maybe like,
yeah, or like an ATV, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I think you could put two bikes side by side, two people side by side, or a couple people side by side. And then, yeah, I think of them too, like we'll refer to like what might be like an ATV road. Like maybe it's not big enough for a car, but it's like big enough for like a small off-road vehicle, et cetera. That you'd be like, ooh, there's a bunch of double track on this run. And that means that you got some wider trail. And it's generally, in my mind, it's like a nice running surface, but it's not always a nice running surface.
Yeah. And it's not a road, right? It's not just like, like there's actually like it feels like a trail. Cause it's like, it feels like there's like obstacles in between the double track.
Yeah. Or you live in the Pacific Northwest and there's a bunch of like old decommissioned forest roads. They make some quality. I
don't know, but like, I guess I'm also on the like team of double track also being kind of manicured and just being kind of wide.
Yeah, except there is some quote unquote double track on Tam, for example, that we refer to as like death cookies because there's just these chunky rocks on it.
Yeah,
too.
totally.
So
so it can be really technical or it cannot be too.
But yeah, so generally it's going to refer to like a width of a trail. And then based on where you are geographically might depend on if it's more or less manicured. I guess kind of like the next one in my mind that I really liked was douche grade.
I love this one.
I think we've made it a universal term at this point. Keely, can you define douche grade?
I don't know if I coined this, but I want to give myself the credit that I did, but I don't know. I feel like I thought of this term back when I ran White River because the whole race is douche grade, but basically it's like an incline that is steep enough to feel like you're going uphill, but like not steep enough to warrant hiking. So you're mainly running the entire time and you get into this rhythm, but like you kind of want to hike, but you know you shouldn't because it's just not steep enough to warrant hiking. And so it's douche grade because you're just constantly going up, but it's not steep enough to hike.
Yeah, I think that it's one of those things where when you're feeling really good and you're running up it, you're like, I am amazing. I am so strong. I am crushing this hill. And when you feel tired and weak, you're like, why is this Mount Everest? Like, why is that? Or why is this flat so hard? Because sometimes it's like a low enough grade where it even like appears relatively flat. And you're like, why is there's, for example, there's 4 miles when you leave Valencine, or 4 kilometers rather, when you leave Valencine during UTMB or CCC, where you parallel this road and you're like, why is this 4K so hard? And it's because it's slightly uphill the whole way. But when you're feeling fresh, that feels amazing. And when you're not feeling fresh, it is the worst possible incline because you can't really walk it, but I think that's what hell is like, maybe. Just filled with that. Okay. Next on my list was kitty litter. Does anyone have a definition for why someone might refer to something as kitty litter on a trail surface?
I mean, I have an example. Basically, it's in Colorado where you have basically very fine little rocks. It's not dust, but they're definitely rocks. And then you go around a switchback and like you just lose grip and you basically like skid out. That's my experience with kitty litter. So maybe that helps form a definition.
Yeah. So you think of it, right? Like, what does kitty litter look like? It looks like a bunch of like tiny rocks, essentially. They're not rocks that are so big that you can avoid them or go around them, right? It's kind of like on a flat surface, it might be considered gravel. But when kitty litter is a fine layer of something on top of a otherwise hard, firm trail surface, you get that loose kind of skittery feeling where you might not have as much traction as you like. So either an uphill or a downhill where you just feel like you can't quite get purchase on the ground. It's because you've got that kitty litter like surface where no matter how big your lugs are on the bottom of your shoes, you're kind of SOL.
Yeah.
I'd never heard this one before, but I like it.
Yeah. In the Front Range, I feel like we get it a lot, especially in the heat of summer because it's so dry. Then we get like the monsoon season in Colorado, like in July and August, and we get like afternoon thunderstorms. And so it like washes away like all the kitty litter and puts it on top of like the actual like big rock steps that we have. And then you run on the rock and then you just basically, it's like ball bearings on that. So you have to be really careful so you don't skid out.
I've in the bike community, I'll oftentimes hear them talk about like ball bearings on concrete. And that's the same sort of sensation as kitty litter. Essentially, you've got a really firm surface with like a very fine rocky surface on top of it. So you just don't get great traction.
Yeah.
This is, I feel like we're doing a spelling bee where I'm going to be like, and use it in a sentence. Okay. The next one, I feel like this is like, we use it on TAM a bunch in the Bay Area, but baby heads.
I love this one. It's so
baby
visual.
heads. I'll kick off baby heads. It's the visual is probably not great. We call them softballs or apples or something too, but essentially rocks or death cookies, people call them death cookies on like one specific trail on TAM, but essentially rocks that are about the size of a softball, or in that case, a baby head, in which it's just really hard surface to run on because it's not like, they're not flat. They're very like, you're trying to avoid them so you don't roll an ankle. They're generally loose too. They're not like firmly planted into the ground. But yeah, you might hear someone refer to that a trail of having a lot of baby heads on it. And that's what they're referring to. They're referring to a size of a rocky surface in which making downhill or uphill progress can be very frustrating.
Yeah, I would say like baby heads. It's basically just like softballs, but they're like the big rocks that are movable. It's really hard. I mean, Leadville 100 mountain bike and the run has a lot of those.
Tons of those.
It actually makes it very hard in technical running because it's like a workout for your ankles. Like I'm thinking like one of the riverbed descents and even Speed Go in the 50K on that backside of I'm going to say Lone Peak, but that's not the right one because we just talked about the rut of Mount. I forget which one it is. But then it's and then for mountain biking, like even going uphill or downhill, like you lose your momentum when you hit it because it's like everything's moving underfoot and under a tire.
Yeah, you'll see them like on washes, for example. Like you'll see them in an area where like a lot of water moves down through it. A riverbed is a great example. But essentially on an uphill, for example, it might be a grade where you'd otherwise be able to run, but because of this rocky surface, because of the baby head-esque nature of it, you might actually find that it's easier to hike, for example, because it's just like you're losing purchase, you're rolling off of these rocks, and it's easier to maybe hike a section where you are losing momentum otherwise. Okay, the next one on my list was tacky, and I don't mean your tacky. I'm talking about tacky as in a trail surface. Who wants to take a swing at tacky?
I mean, it's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
I was just going to say it's like really good trail conditions where you're actually able to stick kind of to the ground.
Without sliding, right? Like I think of like tacky mud where you have grip, but you don't slide.
Yeah, it's sticky. It's like a nice, but I think it's generally positive. I think it's generally like a positive stickiness. So it could be wet and it could be mud, but it's like it's dry enough that you have this sticky traction quality to it.
Yeah, I think of it more from a mountain bike lens of like when you get like just a little bit of rain on trails to get them just a little bit
tacky,
damp, then they're so tacky you just can fly and there's not like dust that you're
Yeah, totally. I completely, I think, definitely. I would think cycling term as well.
And I say fly loosely because I'm not that fast.
No, but I think tacky is a quality that we can talk about on the trail surface too. Because we've definitely seen where I've run with Keely from her house when there's been more rain than tackiness level.
Oh,
and it goes from tacky to very sloppy very quickly. That's when you break out. We'll have to do a shoe vocab day and talk about lugs and millimeters. But yeah, you need the soccer cleats on those days to stay upright. So speaking of the opposite of tacky, what would greasy be in reference to a trail quality? The surface is greasy.
I immediately think that I've fallen and I have greasy mud all over me.
Yeah, I think of it in like rocks and bridges. I mean, this is my P&W lens, maybe a little bit. But if you have ever run in California or Oregon or Washington, and maybe the East Coast too, you probably have apprehension over wooden surfaces in particular, because when they are wet or damp, they get greasy, in which it's not muddy, it's not sloppy looking, right? It's it's just enough moisture on a surface, like on a rock surface, like a big flat piece of rock or a bridge, a wooden bridge, for example, where it becomes greasy from that moisture. And suddenly you no longer possess the quality of traction on that surface. I have eaten shit so many times on lightly damp bridges for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
I'm only
Yeah,
laughing.
do
'cause I
not trust the
remember-
bridges.
Oh yeah. And like the moss, right? It's like I'm not used to that as much here. And I remember the first time I went out and like running in the PNW to meet like the Brooks team, and I just like literally face planted because of like a Rudy thing that
Oh
you
yeah.
know, obviously didn't have grip.
Yeah, you learn that on the mountain bike too, like roots. You're like,
Oh,
your
yeah.
tires have to go a very specific direction across them, because the same thing. It's like when they're greasy, when they're wet. So it's one of those things that can catch you off guard because you're not looking for mud or ice or something. It's just like this dampness to a hard surface that no longer creates any form of traction. Okay. The last one I had on my list for today was vertical gain. And this is important in reference to trails because we'll talk a little bit about that in this upcoming section. How would you guys define vertical gain from a vocab standpoint?
Anything going uphill.
I would say it's the amount of vert that you gain in a run. So it's the amount of elevation gain that you climb. And so a lot of people like to just say how much they climb. It doesn't mean total elevation change. So it's just the gain. So like if I say, oh, I'm going for a 50K with 10,000 feet of climbing or 10,000 feet of vertical gain, that means the run climbs 10,000 feet cumulatively over that distance. So that's what I think of for vertical gain.
Yeah. And I think of like, as we kind of take this towards like how to choose and find trail routes, vertical gain might be something that you look at accumulatively over the course of an entire run or route. And it can also be, you can even look at it in vertical gain per mile. So if you're trying to like match a long run or a hill climb in a workout to something similar to a race you might have coming up, you might be looking at, oh, I know my race averages 200 feet of vertical gain per mile. And then you can like replicate that in your training run by multiplying it out, say it's a 10-mile run, right? So all of a sudden it's going to be, okay, I'm going to be looking for 2,000 feet of vertical gain in my 10-mile route. So we can think about that vertical gain term a little bit as we bridge into how the heck do you figure out what trails and routes you're going to run on day to day. So to start this off, the theme idea kind of circles around this notion of like, while we have a lot of experience on the trail, we've all experienced like showing up somewhere new and being unfamiliar with the running routes, the trails around us, et cetera, and having to put together a day-to-day running route or a long run or a workout run route. And so that's kind of how we're going to approach it. And hopefully that is helpful for those of you who might be new, not only new to the area, but new to trail running in general, trying to figure out what you're going to do day in and day out. So I guess I'd love to start with just kind of like, where do you all start when you hit the ground somewhere new when it comes to trying to find where you're going to go for your afternoon run or your run tomorrow morning?
Yeah. So I mean, Strava is a good place for me to start. Like either if I know friends who are in the area or even friends of friends, like if I don't know them and kind of seeing a route and kind of like looking at the like the vertical gain of a run that they've done, like proximity to me. Or if I don't know anyone, Strava has a really good like route finder, like they have like a heat map of like common routes that people have done. So that's a good place for me to start. Usually it's where I always start. I do like a little bit of research pre-landing, pre-arrival of the destination. So I kind of have a general idea, especially like when I'm camping, like where I like camp close to the trailhead. So it doesn't involve a lot of like, moving parts, especially if it's in a new place. And then if I, like hitting up people that I know, so that I think it's one of my favorite things. If people come into town, I can kind of show them my favorite routes, and like kind of doing the same for meeting up with friends.
Nice. What about for you, Keely?
I definitely start with Strava. I'll look at like the heat map sometimes though, and then find some like segments that are close to me. And then I'll like creep in who's ran them recently so that I know that like the route is passable within like a recent date. And then I'll like click on those runs and kind of like, copy the route and then go run it. Or I also like to kind of reach out to the community sometimes, just because I feel like the trail and ultra running community is really great and also lives in a lot of different areas. And so sometimes I just put an Instagram post out and be like, hey, does anybody want to go for a run like in this area? And I know there's local trail runners who are like always willing to show you the trails. Just because I know sometimes, especially in places that have, more wildlife than normal, more like difficult terrain than normal, it can be really intimidating to go running by yourself, even if you do have a route. And so sometimes I just reach out because I'd rather run with someone who knows where they're going. And then you're always feeling a little more confident when you're running with someone else in a new place, because then, if you do come across a bear or a moose, you feel a little bit more confident having someone with you than being by yourself. And so I've had a lot of athletes ask me about this recently because they've been traveling to really cool places, but they're with, their family or somebody who doesn't necessarily run, and they easily get scared, right? Because like I would too. I don't want to run across a grizzly bear in Alaska by myself. So don't hesitate to kind of reach out to local community, creep on different local run groups, and like go with people, because obviously like that makes it a lot easier for you too.
Yeah. And there's generally forums around like a local running club. Or like this is just an example that I've seen recently. Like we have our free trail Slack channel. And there are like one of the sub channels in there. You could be like, hey, like I'm traveling to, like I helped someone with some routes for Bozeman a couple months ago. They're like, hey, I'm going to be in Bozeman around this time. Like what, like looking at runs that are, within a 20-minute drive of this area, et cetera. And because I've run there a bunch and used to live there, I like was able to provide them with a couple really good options. And then also being like, oh, you should also check out like this Facebook group or this or you could reach out to this run shop, et cetera, if they're doing a group run. So it's like all of a sudden you can kind of piecemeal getting some of that outside advice, or someone might even say like, hey, actually, I'm going to be there too, or I live in Austin, or I live in San Diego. Like when you're going to be there, like I would love to take you for a run. Someone reached out to me recently saying they're going to be in Seattle via free trail like next week. And I was like, oh, I'm going to be out of town, unfortunately, but like, this is what I'd recommend type of thing. So it's like, yeah, I think it's the friends of friends, the forums can be really good because it gives you a subset of a community in a specific area that you're looking for. Mm-hmm. So I know there can still be some stranger danger involved in that, but I think starting to source some of that information can be a helpful first step. And same goes for if you're just new to trail running and you're looking at your area locally, right? Like that's that group run or a small from like a running shop or a women's running group, et cetera, that doesn't exist everywhere, but it exists in a lot of places. And that'd be kind of the first place that I would start to put out feelers locally. And then you'll find your people from that run group to start to, we've talked about this with like finding friends. That's kind of the like, take that find a friend approach a little bit there.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to like reach out to people on Strava either. I know that sounds kind of creepy, but like, especially like girl to girl or guy to guy, I think that's a little less creepy. I've met some really good friends on Strava because when I moved to Portland, I didn't know anybody. And I ran by a couple girls once that were running trails, and I'd like found them on Strava and was like, hey, like I'm new, like want to run sometime. Like they're some of my dearest friends. So it was like totally worth it, but felt a little creepy, but like, I feel like especially when it's like you're similar age, maybe same gender, make it a little less like weird. It's a good way to like get someone to show you the trails and also like make you feel welcome to a space. And I would say like if I got someone to reach out that way, I would probably not feel weird about it. I would be like, oh yeah, I'll take you out for a run. Like if you're new to town, you don't know where to go or whatever. Sounds fun.
Yeah, use the friends of friends approach too, I think is good. You might not know anyone locally, but you might know someone else who knows someone locally. And maybe they know someone else who is local and has the same schedule as you, et cetera. There's all these little factors that have to play out. And then I guess the next step, or I'm trying to think about the next step, right? So once you got an idea, right? Like, oh, I'm going to run at Tiger Mountain from the Red Town, the Red Town trailhead. All of a sudden, like, what are your next steps to kind of like start to put together more info about that route? Is it, downloading a map? Is it how do you check trail conditions? What kind of weather factors should you take into account?
Yeah, I mean, I liked what Keely said about checking recent history on the runs. I've done that too, to see if it's like, passable, right? Or people have done it if it's in for the season. I know I do that a lot, even here. If it's a route I've run before, just like to check like snow conditions, and people kind of write like mini trail reports on Strava or something like this. But yeah, the first step that I do is I always download it. the GPS file. I do it in like multiple places just in case like accuracy or if it doesn't work. So one of the 2 places I downloaded on is Gaia, and then on my actual Coros watch.
Yeah, getting comfortable with a mapping app of some sort, I think, is really, really smart from a safety standpoint, I guess is what I would say. Like, it just takes some time. If it's Onyx or Gaia or any other form or putting it on your watch, like having that, practicing that skill. And even like REI, for example, like offers classes on mapping and that kind of stuff. Like these things can be sought out. But having that comfort and familiarity with like how you understand where you are in space on a map, I think is really good. Even if it means you're going to take 10 minutes during your run to do that, to reorient yourself kind of over and over again, I think is a big thing that I've had to, like being comfortable and confident in that greatly increases my comfort of being out alone in a new area, for example, just because it's like, I know where I am on the map and I know how to get myself back to where I started.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I basically will echo all of that. And then I'd say I also look at like other trails that are nearby as like alternatives and just kind of like try to get a lay of the land before I go, especially if it's like a fully new place, so that I'm not out there looking at my map the whole time, just because that can be kind of annoying to do on a run. So I try to like at least look at the map beforehand, look at the surrounding trails, get a lay of the land so that I don't feel like I'm in the middle of nowhere. So that I'm not like having to check the map every, quarter mile and feel like kind of stressed.
Yeah. Just once again, it's that familiarity, right? And like, and maybe it means just like, I'm going to plan in an extra 10 minutes because I know that I'm going to take a little bit more time as I get to know an area. And then as I get to know an area, I'm going to get that time back because I'm going to know that, oh, if I take a right on this trail, it's going to bring me back to the trailhead sooner. Or, oh, I actually have an extra 20 minutes today. So I can take this trail and go out a little bit further, et cetera. So I think that's a super important factor for sure. I dig it. Okay. I think the next piece, and this kind of ties back into that vertical gain idea, is like, how do you go about understanding the terrain on that map, right? Because when you're routing it, you're like, this is a flat line on a squiggly, this is a squiggly line on a flat surface. And we know that while our maps might be 2D, the terrain is actually 3D. So I'm wondering what you take into account when you're putting together a weekday route, or what you might be taking into account when you're looking for a specific workout route. And then also kind of looking at long runs as well. Like, how are you thinking about understanding the metrics behind the route, right? Like if you're using Strava, for example, or Gaia, and you've mapped it, it's going to give you some metrics on the back end of that. Like, how are you taking that into account, or how are you seeking out specific metrics to get the run you want?
Yeah. I mean, it's good because obviously every trail is not created equally. And even if like, some metrics I would look at as like % grade of the trail to see how steep it is, right? Because that could maybe, and also you can look at the times that people run on it to get a general gist of how long the route will take, right? But even if something isn't necessarily super steep, it can be really technical, and it can, put the pace down, right? And you might have to hike it, like how we just mentioned with, baby heads on a douche grade. Like you might end up hiking it just because you don't really get the tackiness and like the ability to run uphill. But those are the metrics that I do, or kind of like asking around. But sometimes, you don't always know. You kind of have to have a sense of adventure, kind of going out there and finding it out. I feel like I'm less specific when I'm just doing a run. But if I'm, doing a trail run, then like a workout, and I want it to kind of be able to run uphill for like hill repeats or something, or I'm trying to do a faster pace run, right? Then maybe something I've done is try to like look at the Gaia map or different maps to see if it's more of like a fire road versus like a single track trail. But yeah, it can actually be pretty tough to figure out all those details, especially in a new place.
Yeah, I think it's like a safe rule of thumb. Well, I guess there's two things. Strava does start to learn about you a little bit. And so I'd say sometimes when I find a route that I want to run, it does estimate like how long they think it's going to take you. And I think that's relatively accurate, especially for me for running. It's not accurate for me for biking, just because I do mostly mountain biking. And so it always thinks I'm going to go really slow on my road bike. But For running, I think it's kind of accurate. I still built in like a 20-minute buffer just because you never know. But if you're like brand new to trails, I would say like you kind of want to just like assume it's going to take a lot longer than a road run would. And so like say you're used to running roads and you're running at like 8-minute pace on roads, but you want to go run a 10-mile loop that's trail that has like, you know, modest amount of climbing, we'll say like 2,000 feet, you should probably not assume it's going to be the same speed as a road run. So like instead of thinking like, oh, it's probably going to be 8-minute pace, I would probably go on the side of like thinking it's going to be closer to 12, 13-minute pace and just plan for that amount of time. And then, you know, if it's faster, that's great. But like kind of just give yourself an extra buffer, especially for like route navigation, different kinds of technicality of trail and all of that. But yeah, I'd say like I'm similar to Hillary. When I'm planning a route, I think about like what's the goal of the run. If it's an easy run, then I don't really look for a specific vertical gain. It could be flat, it could be a little bit hilly. But if I'm training for a specific race and I want to hit that like feet per mile ratio or length of climb that's like maybe similar to a run that's going to be in the race or good for a workout, then I'll start to really look into the nitty gritty of the route. And that like gets a little more nuanced. You might have to like go searching for segments that are like a climb that might take 15 minutes and then piece together a route that uses that segment somehow by looking at other runs that have gone through that area. So it can get as nuanced as you want. But I will say that like, you know, it can also be just simple and it doesn't have to be this intimidating thing, because if you're starting out and you just want to get out on a trail, you can just pick a trail that has a modest amount of elevation gain and then just go out and try to do, you know, a 4-mile loop or something like that on trail and see how that feels.
Yeah. And I think it's like understanding the purpose of that run too. So say you're doing an interval session, right? And say you're doing short intervals, like 1 to 3 minutes. You're like, okay, like I just need to find a 1-minute hill, 2-minute hill, or a 3-minute hill. And then and you can like utilize Strava or like you can sort of guesstimate that a little bit as far as like distance and vert goes. And then all of a sudden, you know, you just have to figure out your warm up and your cool down, and you're just going to repeat on that one hill. I've definitely spent a lot of time looking at hill length to find like the ideal spot to do a workout, particularly if it's like, I've lived in places where I've been very fortunate to have like really long mountain roads, for example, that are going uphill the whole time. So I can do the entire workout uphill and just have like a really long downhill cool down. But for the most part, that's not most of our realities. And it's like we're going to be repeating potentially like a much smaller hill. So looking for a hill that matches the length of your needed interval, for example, if you're going to be doing those intervals uphill, or if you're going to be doing them through an urban area, I just look for uninterrupted running, i.e. where it's like, I know that I can go for 1 to 10 minutes without having to hit a stoplight or a stop sign, for example, from like a safety standpoint. And then I think the last piece there that you guys touched on as well is just going in knowing that if I'm coming from the road and I'm coming to trail, that everything's going to just take a little bit longer. And I think it's really important not to get hung up on pace, because it can be really easy to be like, well, this 12-mile run should take me an hour and 45 minutes or 2 hours or whatever it is. And that 12-mile run might take 3 hours or 3.5 hours. I routinely run, a lot of my runs in the Seattle area average 12 to 13-minute miles over the course of the run, just because we got a bunch of really slow terrain, be it technicality or it being really steep uphill, for example. So understanding kind of what you're looking for and that it's just going to be a little bit slower. But yeah, I think that vertical gain understanding of like, is it one big climb? Is it a bunch of little climbs? And you can start to piece that together both via the elevation profile on something like Gaia or on Strava. And I think that those are good metrics. That was Hillary's stomach, but I think it was just a dog.
I'm sorry. It's a dog. I'm sorry.
I love it.
He was yawning and he just woke up. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. Do you have a dog?
No, he's just babysitting for the day.
Oh, we love it.
You can see him. German short-haired pointer. Can you see him?
Oh, he's so cute.
For those of you who are not watching this, Hillary's now being attacked viciously with kisses by a very cute German short-haired pointer. Okay. I think we've got kind of a good take of like kind of what you're looking for. Oh no. What you're looking for. Generally speaking, I guess kind of the last couple of questions I had are more like inclined towards safety. And so I'm wondering, what are some of the essentials you make sure to carry with you on these runs? Maybe both for a short run, like your day-to-day run. What's the essential or the essentials from a safety and well-being standpoint you're taking with you? And then on a long run, how does that change or evolve just because you're going to be out maybe longer or in a more remote area?
Yeah, I mean, for a short run, I feel like I always take my phone. If it's like less than an hour, we'll say like my essentials are really just phone. And then I'd say runs that are getting like longer or more into the wilderness, like I always take either a handheld or like a pack and take water, take extra water, take a filter if you're going into the backcountry, and then always bring like food that you think you'll need for the run, and then always pack like 2 extra just in case it takes a little extra time. And then I'd say like when it's particularly remote and it's also like different seasons where it's not always really, really hot, I always pack an extra jacket. And then if it's a really long run, I'll sometimes pack like sign it kind of UTMB style and pack like an extra sports bra, extra top, extra jacket, and a headlamp in case like things really go awry and you all of a sudden find yourself running in the dark and you need a light. And then the last thing that I'm really bad at that I try to do is always charge my phone before, because I typically don't. And then my phone's notorious for dying and then I have no phone. So like I always try to charge it on my drive to the trailhead just so that it's fully charged when you start, because sometimes when you're like toggling in and out of different maps and you don't have service and you do have service, it just like kills the battery faster. So those are kind of my go-tos for that kind of stuff.
Hillary, what about for you? You're muted. We can't hear you.
I muted it for the doggo. Anyways, sorry. So I mean, to basically echo what Keely said, I always put my phone in airplane mode, actually, just so like I don't drain the battery. So I can still, if I have the map downloaded, I can kind of still look at it. But another thing that I have is this, it's kind of the same as like we've heard like a spot tracker, but something I always bring with me into the backcountry. There's this new device I've been testing out. It's like by Motorola, but basically if your cell phone doesn't have service, you can still, as long as you have the app downloaded, you can still send messages basically like through via Bluetooth, like through satellite, actually through this device. So it's actually really good. So I can kind of like tell people where I'm going, and then, I can send check-ins, or if anything were to happen, there's like an SOS button. But yeah, I think the most important thing is like food, water, and layers. Like you never know, weather can change so drastically, anywhere where you are, especially if you're kind of going to a more remote area. I even bring this like on my long runs, even in the Front Range, just to like kind of practice, because all of my races are going to have kind of like a heavy pack with mandatory gear. So it's something I just bring with me, even if I don't necessarily need it or use it.
Yeah. Stephen and I both now have our own Garmin InReach minis that we'll carry on long outings for that very reason. It gives us the ability to send a text via satellite, and also kind of pre-programmed text to like, hey, I'm okay, it's just taking long, or like kind of like those initiated things out to your key emergency contacts, as well as being able to get text out in general, or SOS, heaven forbid something goes really, really wrong. The ability to SOS. If I'm on a really long run in the backcountry, I will also, if I'm running with a group in particular, we will kind of divide and conquer on backcountry first aid. And that's like pretty basic stuff. It's like an emergency blanket. It's like a small splint, it's a bandage, etc. So we'll oftentimes like pick and choose a little bit of knowing like someone in our group of 3 or 4 is carrying X, Y, or Z thing. Someone else is carrying an InReach or something similar, et cetera. So you can kind of parse out some of that amongst a group of people. But yeah, those backup calories, that backup head, or the headlamp just in case, the rain jacket just in case, because you'd rather have it and not need it than really need it and not have it. And then I think the other big thing too is just telling someone where you're going to be. I do this all the time for people. I say, hey, like I am going to this location. Even if that's a text to a friend who's not in the area, I'll text them to say, hey, I'm going for a run here. I will be out by this time. If you don't hear from me by this time, this is the next step. Just like some like loose stuff so that they know that I've come out from a long run somewhere. Just from like a safety standpoint, right? We don't want anyone to be stranded out there. And that sounds kind of dire and scary, but it's just, little common safety things that we think are important for anyone that's getting out into the backcountry on longer and longer runs as you come over to the trail side of things. And then the last one I had was that Have any of you guys experienced a bail? And we call them proud bails in our household, of like when you're on a route and it just is like not going right, and you've got to make a decision to turn back or to alter your route. Hilly, do you have something like that?
Oh yeah, I have plenty of those. And I think it can be more like weather based. Sorry, you hear the doggo. Okay, it can be more weather based, but also like I've had some where it's just like mentally, like I didn't feel psyched to do the route, and I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to do it. I remember in particular, like there was one, it's like at the 4-pass loop outside of Aspen, and it's like a pretty committing loop. Like once you're back there, you're back there. And the weather was okay. It wasn't like bad, but I just wasn't feeling it, and kind of made it to going up the first pass. And it was like, okay, I'm going to do a shorter day, and like I was like kind of in the area, gave myself a couple days, and then went out and did it when I felt more mentally prepared. But I think it can be hard, but I definitely tend to listen to those moments when I actually don't feel mentally psyched to do it. Cause I think that's when like the ankle twist and like the silly things can happen, and you kind of are out in the backcountry, and like it can turn into a long day real fast.
Yeah, that's a really important note. Keely, have you had to bail on anything big or small?
I mean, totally, but I'd say like I don't do quite as many adventurous runs as you guys do. So I feel like I've not really had any things that I've had to bail off of from a weather perspective. Like I don't summit that many mountains. And when I do them in the summer. So I have never ran into anything like that. But I'd say like I would echo what Hillary says. I've had a lot of times where I've set out to do like a really gnarly route, and I have like a really visceral feeling of like not doing it. And like the one time I've done it, I've like gnarly messed up my ankle. So now I try to listen to that visceral feeling, and I don't even know what it is really, but I think we sometimes know like either our bodies aren't ready for it, like we're pushing through something we don't need to, or like we just have like lack of stoke or readiness for the route. Like something tells you that you're not really ready, and I feel like you kind of got to listen to that. And then I'd say in a more extreme fashion, like I think a lot of people who do get stuck in like avalanches and that kind of stuff, I think there are some people who say they had a feeling that it was going to be maybe a little dangerous, and that they wish or they should have listened to that. And so I think we do have a sixth sense in a way where we're like, let's pump the brakes. And I think you should listen to that. Like no run is worth your life, or even just like an injury or something that's unnecessary.
Yep. And I think like on the less extreme end of that too, it's just like there's some days where it's worth pushing through that sensation, or that maybe it's fatigue, et cetera. Like, oh, I don't want to do this. And then there are days where it's like really not worth it. And I tell athletes too, like, just try the warm up. Like even if you like, you're sitting in the trailhead dreading this workout, just try the warm up. Give yourself 20 minutes. And if it's not better in 20 minutes, like turn around and run back to the car type of thing, versus like just trying to get people out the door. For example, I've definitely bailed out of workouts, an interval or two in, or I've bailed out of a long run or a run, 20 or 30 minutes in, just because my body said no. And I think it's important to recognize that like pushing through anything, be it fear, fatigue, et cetera, there are moments to like extend your limits. And then there are days where it's really not worth it. So I think it's important to kind of listen to that gut, and then have people that you can bounce those sensations off of, right? Like have that conversation with your coach or a training partner or a friend or someone in your support system too, to kind of work through why you felt the way you did. Just so that you can kind of like know, was there something that we should have changed next time type of thing. So yeah, those are the bails. They can be really big and they can be really small. I think we're going to end it there for our trail specific 101 stuff for today. Hopefully that painted a picture of how we go about finding trails and routes for daily runs and long runs. And I think we've got some society slamming to do before we let you go. Keely, I'm wondering if you want to, or Hillary wants to read this first one, and then I'll take our last one for today.
Yeah, Hillary, you should go for it.
Okay, awesome. So just going to read this one. So hi again, finally reaching out about something I've been thinking about for the last 8 months after I missed my first period ever right before Black Canyon. My coach, Jenny Q, and I began to watch for other symptoms. I have not missed one again, those. So sometimes I have an irregular cycle. So fast forward to this morning, a friend and I were running and talking about periods, because it's insane when you suddenly end up on the exact same cycle as your training partner. And we were talking about how hard it is at 40 something years old to figure out the difference between normal perimenopause symptoms and cycle deviations from RED-S. So they require similar but often different management strategies for symptoms. So yes, sleep is good no matter what, as is good fueling. But how do we know when to worry about missed periods? I remembered you saying recently you want to dive into some more menopause talk, and I'm hoping you can address this as well. Thanks for being amazing as always. This is a really good
question.
One. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like there's no written rule that says like this is for sure perimenopause and this is for sure RED-S. That's going to be something you can do at home and figure out for yourself. And so, menopause can be as early as in your 30s, and it can also start in your 50s. And so as someone who's in their 40s, it's likely that you could be going through perimenopause, but it's also likely that you're not. And so I would say, like, in my mind, the first thing to do is just continue to track your cycle very vigilantly and write down any symptoms that you're experiencing, because your physician will want to know that too. And I think some of those symptoms will help them be able to differentiate between something like RED-S or perimenopause. And so, think about how you're feeling at night, think about hot flashes, think about how your energy is feeling, think about all of these things and just continue to write them down alongside your cycle. And then, when you are training for a race and maybe you're noticing that your cycle always goes away before a really big race or during a really big training block, if that's always when it's late or irregular, then I think, that's a little bit more evidence to think that it could potentially be related to RED-S. But I'd say continue to track it. I would schedule an appointment with your PCP and just really, talk to them about it and see what they're thinking. Blood tests will always help as well. And then again, just continue to diligently track it, because this space is nuanced and also understudied. And so no one's going to be able to tell you 100% definitively that this is exactly where you're at right this day. And so just gathering a lot of data to bring with you to your doctor to really have a better discussion around it, I think will be really helpful. And then, just continue to monitor those symptoms and writing down exactly how you're feeling, how your training's going, and all these symptoms in relation to your cycle days, I think will be really helpful.
Yeah. I think the other possible person to add to your team there outside of your PCP is also a registered dietitian who works with athletes, endurance athletes, and maybe even specifically with women, or women who are going through perimenopause and menopause, just because they'll have some kind of they have a lot of experience evaluating this and looking for it. So they might have some, even if it's just anecdotal evidence to point you in one direction or another. People do, when you work in kind of a subspecialty, develop some really good insight and tells. It's kind of uncanny how many stress fractures I can diagnose just from talking to an athlete on a phone, even though I'm not a PT or an orthopedic physician, for example. It's just ooh, I've heard that story before. I really think that you need to get an MRI, etc. It's you begin to pick up on trends and patterns. And so working with an RD potentially would be another move if this person is not at least yet working with someone in that space. They'll be to help evaluate the RED-S side of things in particular, and then might have some tips and tricks if you are in fact in perimenopause.
Yeah. And be oh, actually your fueling does seem like it could be a little bit under what you need. And so maybe we do need to nuance and increase that a little bit.
Yeah. Or targeting protein for very specific timing, which we do know has a great impact on women, particularly when they're fully in a menopausal phase. So, but yeah, it's definitely a topic that we are learning more about. And we will, again, at some point in time, do another kind of deep dive conversation, hopefully with an expert in the field, just to kind of continue to bring some of that newer information to the forefront. So bear with us or wait for us, because we hope to have that coming down the pipeline. And then the last one was a write-in from a listener, which is kind of cool to see, from a listener named Ashley. And it says, "Hi team, I've been listening to your pod since the beginning. Thanks for doing what you do. Back on one of the early pods, I remember Corrine talking about big, scary goals. Ironically, my big, scary goal for a chunk of the years has been to cover a route that Corrine has so impressively set the FKT on, that being the Tahoe Rim Trail. I had thought I maybe had a chance of getting all the way around the TRT and possibly getting towards that FKT back with the old time. I think that's like with Chrissy Mole's time is my guess, previous to the one that I ran. And then after Corrine's run, I had thought it was completely out of reach. But after listening to your pod episodes talking about how to go for goals and that it's okay to come up short, I have gotten up the confidence to give it a try. So this Saturday, she wrote this back to us on September 4th. I will set out to cover the TRT as quickly as my body allows. Whether I get close to Corrine's time, come up super short, or don't even make it all the way around, I'll be proud of myself for trying. Thank you for elevating women in running and the idea that failure is okay. Time to shoot my shot. Love, Ashley. And we do know that she went out and attempted it on, I think, September 11th that weekend and did come up short. It sounded like things went a little off the rails after about 80 or 90 miles and eventually pulled the plug at, I think, 107 miles in, which is a lot of miles. The route's 171 miles. So she made a really good go of it. So Ashley, congratulations. You're right. Failure is okay. And I know that you'll get back out on a big, long trail soon as well. But yeah, you're right. Big, scary goals, I think, are good for all of us. And we're going to keep practicing what we preach, hopefully, and continue to go after big, scary goals. So I think that's it for this week. It was so nice. I mean, hopefully you didn't hate our vocab and our Trail 101. If you have any vocab suggestions or Trail 101 topic suggestions that you'd like us to cover, please don't hesitate to slide into our DMs. Head over to the Trail Society Instagram channel and slide into our DMs there as well. And until next time, we'll see you on the trails.